Hello AP World History students, Mr. Lassiter with you, and in this video we're going to wrap up our review of time period 5 for the AP World History exam. We're still looking at 1750 to 1900 with industrialization and global integration, and we're focusing on that integration spurred on by industrialization with key concept 5.4 on global migration. As you listen to this video, you can click in the description down below and find our review packets, which will help you actively study for your AP exam. And if you need any more information beyond this overview video, take a look at AP Worldopedia or Freemanpedia, two of my very favorite websites. And as we get started with Key Concept 5.4, I'm going to pull a map from Freemanpedia, one of his many very good visuals, to give you an idea of the migration that is taking place in this time period. You can see that it is both internal and external migration. It is interregional and intercontinental. We see various migrations, including internal migrations within the United States and Russia. What is not shown here are the internal migrations to cities, which are important in this time period. But you see other migrations from Europe to the Americas, from East Asia to the Americas, from South Asia to Southern Africa and Southeast Asia. So keeping in mind just generally how widespread this global migration is in this time period, and seeing this image might tip you off to how important of a key concept this is and why it is given its own special treatment. This is our only unit with 4 key concepts. Keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and take a look. With our key concepts, migration in many cases was influenced by changes in demography in both industrialized and unindustrialized societies that presented challenges to existing patterns of living. So that's one of the reasons why we see this movement both within and between societies happen on such a large scale. We see changes in food production in this time period and improved medical conditions contribute to a significant global rise in population. And this occurs in both urban and rural areas. You can see on this chart that significant rise in population, that exponential growth that really begins with the Industrial Revolution and has continued to this present day. Of course, this is occurring in both rural and urban areas, and as rural populations grow, there is pressure on the land, and some people who are not able to farm the land or perhaps not able to purchase and farm their own land move to cities in search for work. Of course, at the same time, this population growth is spurring the growth of industry, and then as industry grows, it demands more workers. So kind of a positive feedback loop in that case. Of course, this is all much more possible because of the nature of new modes of transportation. Both internal and external migrants increasingly relocate to cities in this time period because it becomes much easier. One new mode of transportation that helps with that, of course, is the steam engine in the locomotive train and railroads that allows people to freely and easily relocate to cities and be able to return perhaps to where they're originally from. But we also see people being able to relocate far away from home across oceans because of the quickening of the trip with steamboats. This pattern contributed to the significant global urbanization of the 19th century, and these new modes of transportation really helped with that. The new methods of transportation also allowed for many migrants to return, sometimes periodically and sometimes permanently, to their home societies. It made it much more possible as travel became cheaper and easier. And some examples of this are seen with Italian industrial workers moving to Argentina seasonally and temporarily. You can see that in the left image here, Italian immigrants arriving in Argentina. And on the right, we see Japanese agricultural workers in the Pacific. This image happens to show Japanese strawberry pickers in the Pacific Northwest in Washington in the year 1915. But these agricultural workers could move and work seasonally and then return home. Other examples of this include Lebanese merchants in the Americas who would move to the Americas seasonally or sometimes just for a short period of time before moving home permanently. Now, migrants in this time period relocate for a variety of reasons. Many individuals chose to freely locate in search of work, and of course that in some cases, it's a continuation of what we saw in our last time periods, but we also see this free relocation as a way to fill labor needs as slavery comes to an end in this time period, which of course was not freely choosing. That would be considered coerced and forced labor. But some examples of migrants relocating freely are people doing manual labor, like you see on the left, South Asian workers in the Caribbean who filled those positions and those jobs in sugarcane plantations once slavery is finally outlawed. But this also included people in specialized professions, people who would migrate, say, from Europe to American cities to work in factories. The new global capitalist economy continued to rely on coerced and semi-coerced labor migration, though, in this time period. And even though slavery comes to an end in this time period, it does last into the time period. We see slavery here. We see Chinese and Indian indentured servitude. Indentured servitude makes a comeback as workers from South Asia and East Asia move to other regions within, for example, the British Empire to fill the work that had previously been done by slaves. And we also see convict labor in this time period. So just to recap, again, examples of coerced and semi-coerced labor migration would include slavery, indentured servitude, especially among Chinese and Indian laborers, and then, of course, convict labor. And this is seen not only in the colony of Georgia in the British colonies, but also seen in Australia, the British using convict labor as they began to settle the continent or their colony of Australia. The large-scale nature of migration overall, as the key concepts tell us, especially in the 19th century, produced a variety of consequences and reactions as people began to see increasingly diverse societies. And this was on the part of migrants and existing population. So let's take a look at this trend of these variety of consequences and reactions to this migration that occurs around the world. Well, first of all, due to the physical nature of the labor in demand, migrants tended to be male. And this left women to take on new roles in their home society that had been formerly occupied by men. And we've talked about that in some of our earlier key concepts, how the social roles were changing in this time period as a result of industrialization, both within societies and then as a result of immigration. Migrants in societies migrants often created ethnic enclaves in different parts of the world. And an enclave would be a community of one specific ethnic group that is carved out of or fit within another cultural element. And so some examples of this are seen in Little Italy in New York City, which you see on the far left, Chinatown in San Francisco in the middle there. And we also see ethnic enclaves develop in the Caribbean, as well as you see South Asian communities on the far right there in Trinidad. These ethnic enclaves transported the culture of these immigrants into new environments and also facilitated the development of migrant support networks. So imagine being an Italian immigrant arriving in New York City in a country where you did not speak the language, nor did you know what your job was going to be. By arriving in this neighborhood or this enclave within New York City, you automatically had a network of people who could help you find work or help you learn the language or give you a community to fit into as you adapted your life to this new place. And so those development of migrant support networks were extremely important. For example, Chinatown in San Francisco, it is not the only Chinatown. Manila in the Philippines is the oldest Chinese ethnic enclave in the Pacific, or within Manila in the Philippines. But these ethnic enclaves would have popped up in many different regions of the country where migrants were traveling to. Of course, when migrants arrived in these new environments, they were not always embraced. And so, as the key concepts tell us, receiving societies did not always embrace immigrants. And this is seen in various degrees of ethnic and racial prejudice and the ways states attempted to regulate the increased flow of people across their borders. And so this is no surprise, especially due if you pay attention to the news and the modern immigration crisis the world faces today. There is certainly a reaction and a backlash to large-scale immigration. And a couple examples of this are seen in this time period. For example, in the United States, the influx of Chinese immigrants that were building the railroads in the West and then coming to work on farms in America, it becomes seen as a threat to the American way of life, or a threat to America itself, to have these East Asian Chinese migrants arrive. And so the United States passes the Chinese Exclusion Acts, which places severe restrictions on the arrival of Chinese immigrants to the United States. And in Australia, something similar occurred, although this was a policy that was aimed at restricting immigrants to all non-whites. Once gold is discovered in Australia, there is at first an influx of immigration from South and East Asia, which the White Australia policy puts an end to. The White Australia policy was in play, or was still around until about 1970. This policy restricted, again, immigration to any non-white, restricted any non-whites from coming to Australia to preserve that cultural or believed culturally significant whiteness of the country. If you think about what we've talked about in some of our other key concepts, this is not too surprising. The reaction or the reasons for imperialism were often tied up in new beliefs about race and ethnicity, the new developments of nationality, or the new development of nationalism this time period put language and culture at the forefront, and borders became so important. As migration seemed to challenge those new ideas, reactions were swift and often quite drastic. So that's it. You've made it to the end of time period 5, or at least the review for time period 5 for your AP World History exam. Hopefully this has been helpful. Given that there are 4 key concepts here, I know this was a little bit longer. We'll be back with time period 6 very soon. But go ahead and take a look at those videos, and hopefully this has been helpful. Good luck on your AP exam, and we'll see you next time.